I've had a few people ask how I built this little cabin, so I wanted to put together a simple step-by-step walkthrough of the whole process. I'm not a professional builder, I'm barely a DIYer, and this was my first time doing almost everything in this video, so take everything here as just my experience, not a perfect guide. I learned a whole lot along the way, made plenty of mistakes, and just figured things out as I went. So, if you're thinking about building something similar, hopefully this gives you a couple things to think about. The first step was picking the spot and cleaning it up. There was a nice, partially cleared, flat spot that was tucked into the trees, and I thought it would be perfect. This area was full of brush and uneven ground, so I started by cutting everything down and knocking down the high spots and trying to fill in the low ones. Once it was all cleared, I measured that little spot, hauled some gravel up there, and spread it out to build a simple level pad to use as a foundation. Once all the gravel was in place, I tamped it down and leveled it out as best as I could. With a solid pad to start from, I laid out 3 6x6 12-foot skids to act as the base of the cabin. I measured everything out to get the footprint right, and then spent some time trying to get these skids as level as possible. This part was definitely a challenge for me, and they didn't end up being perfectly level, so I had to fix that later on. If you're planning to build something like this, getting these skids level from the start will save you a lot of time and headaches down the road. With the skids in place, it was time to start framing the floor. I built the perimeter using 2x6s, then measured out 16 inches on center and nailed the joists together. That gave me the basic frame to work from. After that, I glued and nailed down the sheets of 3/4 inch plywood. This created the bottom layer of the floor, and it's what helps keep everything strong and square. It's important to lay out the plywood in an alternating pattern as best practice. I did this part a little interesting though. I built it upside down, and so once it was finished, I had to flip the whole thing over. And luckily I had an excavator on site for the main cabin foundation, so with a little bit of help, we were able to flip the floor into the right position. Once the floor frame was flipped the right way up, I filled in any gaps with a spray insulation, and then I used rock wool to insulate the entire floor. After everything was all insulated, I laid down some 3/4 inch OSB, glued it, and nailed it into place. And that was the finished floor of the cabin. And it was time to start framing the walls. And I want to be clear here, this was my first time doing any real framing, so not everything I did was correct. One of the first mistakes I made was on this wall's window header. I laid the header flat when it's supposed to be turned on its side. When it's flat like this, it doesn't really do anything, so that's definitely something to watch out for and don't do. I also built my walls in an order that made things harder later on. Ideally, you want to build your longest walls first, and I didn't do that, so when I went to assemble and stand up the longer walls, it made things a little more difficult. I'm not going to walk through how to frame step by step since I'm still learning and don't want to give out any poor building information, but I will say this: if you're building something like this for the first time, expect to make mistakes and be ready to adapt as you go. YouTube was my best friend throughout this build. I did a whole lot of learning that way. That being said, I'm almost positive I did the rest of the wall framing correctly. Once the wall frames were up, I moved on to sheathing. This is something you can actually do while the walls are still on the ground, and a lot of people do, but just keep in mind it adds a lot of weight when you go to lift them. I chose to stand my walls first, then sheath them, and I used some plywood for this, but OSB should work as well. I covered each wall fully, and once everything was nailed in place, I went back and cut out the windows and doors. This adds a lot of structural strength and helps keep the walls from moving. Next up was framing the roof. I used 2x6s again here and laid them out 24 inches on center. If I were to do this again, I'd probably tighten that up to 16 inches. I went with a simple shed roof, just a single pitch sloping back. To install the rafters, I cut bird mouth cuts into each one. That took me a little while to get the hang of, but once I figured it out, it went a lot smoother. I also added a bit of overhang on both the front and the back. A lot of this build has been doable solo, but the roof is definitely one of the areas where having an extra set of hands would help. Since I didn't have that, I screwed a temporary brace in place to hold up the end of the rafter while I nailed it in. It wasn't perfect, but it definitely got the job done. Once the main rafters were in, I added support studs on the side walls right underneath them. This helps transfer the load down on the walls and gives the rafters a more solid seat to rest on. After that, I built what's called a ladder on each side of the roof. It's basically some blocking with an additional rafter attached, and it extends the roofline out past the walls to create a small overhang. It's a simple detail, but it helps protect the siding and gives the cabin a cleaner look, in my opinion. With the roof framing finished, I moved on to the roof sheathing. I laid the panels so the seams were staggered, which gives everything better support and keeps the roof nice and solid. After the sheathing was down, I wrapped the cabin. Again, this is something a lot of people do earlier while the walls are still being framed and sheathed on the ground, but ended up doing everything after it was standing. I used this product called HydroGap because I'm using wood siding, and it works well for letting moisture escape while keeping water out. Just make sure to overlap your seams by 4 to 6 inches and give yourself about a foot of overlap on the corners. Next up was installing the windows. For weather sealing, I kept things pretty simple on this build. I used zip stretch tape around the window openings before setting the windows in place, and then added more around the exterior once they were installed. There are definitely more advanced ways to seal windows. I used a more detailed process on the main cabin. But for this project, this approach worked well enough, or hopefully it does. Most important things here are making sure the windows are plumb, square, and sitting properly in the opening. After the windows were in, it was time to weather seal the roof. For this part, I used Grace Ice and Water Shield. It's a peel and stick membrane that helps you protect the roof from leaks and gives you a solid, watertight layer under the metal. I installed it in the middle of summer, which definitely wasn't ideal. The heat made the membrane really sticky, and trying to do it solo was a bit of a battle. It kept folding onto itself, and it wasn't the easiest thing to manage. And once it was down, I knew the cabin was protected from the weather. Next up was the siding. I used a 1x6 pine shiplap and started on the corners, working my way around the cabin. In hindsight, it's probably better to start in the middle of the wall and work outward. That way you avoid what happened to me, which is where I had to rip a board or two in the middle to make everything fit properly. The flat roof sides were pretty straightforward. Level board, nail it off, keep going. The gable ends, though, needed a bit more attention. The roof angle meant I had to measure carefully and make angled cuts at the top to get everything tight and clean. Overall, it's a pretty simple part of the build, but taking your time here really affects how the whole cabin looks. Next was the door install, and this one definitely took 2 people. Getting the door square and plumb is a bit tricky, so I don't have a ton of advice other than taking your time and checking your measurements often. After that, it's really about getting an even reveal all the way around and slowly adjusting things until the door sits right. Then it was time for the trim. This part's a little more tedious, but I kept it simple. I used 1x3 pine for the window trim and painted it to match the windows. I used the same color for the fascia boards as well. Those were 1x8s, and I needed temporary braces again to hold them in place while I secured them. I added trim to the corners of the cabin, along the roofline, and along the bottom edge of the walls. After that, I went around and caulked everywhere I added trim. It's an extra step, but it helps protect the wood and keeps moisture out again. I also finished the underside of the roof using pine boards and installed an aluminum soffit vent at both the top and the bottom of the roof. Then I moved on to installing the metal roof. I didn't film much of this part, but there are a couple of things worth keeping in mind. First, pre-drilling your holes helps lining everything up easier and keeps the panels from shifting when you drive the screws in. And second, don't over tighten the screws. Each one has a small rubber washer that seals out water, and if you crush that water, it won't do its job and you can create leaks without realizing it. Once the exterior was wrapped up, it was time to insulate the inside. I used standard fiberglass insulation for this part. It's affordable, easy to work with, and totally fine for a small, non-living cabin like this. One thing I didn't think about though was that my ceiling rafters were spaced at 24 inches and I bought 16-inch bats, so the ceiling insulation wasn't installed as cleanly or as effectively as it could have been. I also learned that insulation shouldn't be crushed or compressed, and I did that a bit in the walls without realizing it, and squeezing it like that actually reduces its performance. Not perfect, but for the space, it'll do the job. For the interior, I kept things really simple again and used 1x6 tongue and groove pine for the walls, ceiling, and floor. It's super easy to install, looks great, and it fit the vibe that I wanted for the space. I started with the ceiling, then worked my way up from the floor for the walls, making sure to leave a gap at the bottom for the flooring to slide underneath. I did end up going back and redoing a couple of the first boards because they weren't perfectly level, and that small mistake starts to show as you move up the wall. The pine is definitely a softer wood for flooring, but for a cabin like this, it works just fine. I still have some finishing trim to do inside, but this was a good stopping point for what I needed at the time. And that's pretty much it for the build itself. I hope this was at least a little helpful. I made this video for anyone out there looking for some insight into how to build something like this on their own. Because when I started, I watched a ton of YouTube videos and did a whole lot of research just trying to figure out where to even begin. So if you're in that same spot, hopefully you can take something away from this, even if it's just learning from a few of the mistakes that I made along the way. It's not perfect, but I'm super proud of it, and it's cool to see what you can build with a little patience and a willingness to figure things out as you go.